or some other heavenly body. But as they focused their attention on the red dot, they realized that it was in fact another ship, and that it was a ship that was on a parallel or opposite course to their own. And within a relatively short time, as the ship came closer and closer, they realized that the red glow was attributable to the floodlighting of two red and black funnels that were on the other ship. And they glanced over their shoulder and they noticed that the ship that they were on had three red and black funnels that were similarly illuminated. And that event on September the 25th, 1967 was the last time that the venerable Cunard Queens, Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary crossed in mid-Atlantic. And everybody, Cunard, the media, the travel industry, everybody said that that was the beginning of the end of the transatlantic service by ship. And that once the Queen Elizabeth II had entered service, the ship that was due to replace these two Cunard Queens in a year or so, they said once that ship had gone through its lifespan, then the Atlantic service would be completely finished. And what I like to think is that my colleagues at Cunard, my friends at Saint-Nazaire who built this ship, and in fact everybody that was involved in this project, I like to think that collectively we have rewritten history. And that's the story that I'd like to tell you this morning. Now, my own interest in ships began as a very young boy, in fact a boy of 7 years old, when coming home from school, switching on the television, there was the British children's television programme Blue Peter, the longest running children's television programme in the world. And on that particular day, there was a feature all about the Queen Elizabeth. And one of the presenters, Valerie Singleton, travelled to Cherbourg and caught the Queen Elizabeth for the short voyage to Southampton. And I sat mesmerised looking at this great ship, Queen Elizabeth, the public rooms, the bridge, and the various machinery spaces. And I thought then, wouldn't it be fantastic to grow up and be able to design and build ships like that? And that sowed a seed that gradually grew. Now 2 years later, as a family, we travelled from London, where I lived, to Bournemouth. And there we had our annual holiday, and we took a coach trip to Southampton docks. And there in the docks was the brand new Queen Elizabeth II, the ship that replaced those previous queens. And she was only 1 month into her illustrious career. And in those days, before all the tight security that we now have, they allowed coach parties on board, and we walked around the ship, and obviously that only furthered my interest and enthusiasm towards great liners. And as we walked up on deck, steaming into Southampton on one of her last trips was none other than the SS United States, the fastest passenger ship ever built, and a ship on sea trials that achieved something in the order of 45 knots. So if that ship had been sailing down an American highway in 1952 when she was built, she would have attracted a speeding ticket. So fast, but so costly to operate. Now a few years later, again coming home from school, switching on the television, I was by this time 12 years old, Blue Peter, once again, the programme, and then suddenly they stopped from their planned programme and they said we're going to link up by satellite for the very first time to the other side of the world, to Hong Kong, where nonetheless the old Queen Elizabeth, now a floating university called Seawise University, was in the last stages of reconstruction when suddenly she caught fire. You can see the image there of the great Queen Elizabeth on fire. Blue Peter fully showed the ship there and then sadly rolling on her side and becoming a total loss. It was in fact an act of arson against the Hong Kong Chinese owners that had purchased the ship. But every year Blue Peter produced a book, and so for Christmas 1972 I received this book from my parents, and inside the book was an article all about the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of the Seas. Very nice, informative article, various pictures and a nice cutaway plan, but it was the last paragraph that really caught my attention. I'd like to read it out to you now. It was a sad moment for everybody who loves great ships. The Queen Elizabeth was the last of a great age, a superliner, and nothing like her will ever be built again. Now, for a 12-year-old who had set his sights on growing up to design and build a ship that would have been bigger and better than Queen Elizabeth, for Blue Peter, of all programmes, to tell me that I wasn't going to achieve it was a severe blow. Because everybody considered what Blue Peter said, especially in those days, was absolute gospel. Well, it was just so happens that in school we were learning how to write letters. And my English teacher, who I'm still very friendly with, Pat Rupel, she said the most important letter that you can learn to write is a letter of complaint. Because if you can effectively complain, then throughout your life you have a better chance of getting what you want. So for homework, we were charged with writing a letter of complaint about something that we felt very strongly about. So I wrote my letter to Blue Peter, and the only difference was I actually sent my letter off to the programme. A few weeks later, I received a letter back. Here is the letter, and it's from Biddy Baxter, the very famous producer and editor of the programme. And she said that the presenters and everybody had enjoyed reading my ideas for a new ship, and that I shouldn't be disappointed if I never reached my goal or ambition. Now, the thing that really annoyed me more than anything else was not that, because I always felt